Has this ever happened to you? You're out for a walk and you're having a very nice time, but then suddenly you hear something and you look to your side and you find an abandoned kitten. And the first thought that comes to your mind is, oh my God, poor baby, how old is this baby? Hi guys, this is Dr. Luqman with ExcitedCats, bringing you another exciting cat topic. Now, before we get into this topic of today, this is your friendly reminder to please hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, and please do leave us a comment as well. Finding feral kittens is not unusual. In fact, many people who do adopt cats actually find them as kittens when they are either abandoned or lost and their mother is nowhere to be found. However, a very important part of caring for abandoned kittens is knowing their age. This is because kittens at different ages have different heat requirements and have different feeding requirements as well. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the younger a kitten is when you find it, the more that kitten will need feeding and the more warmth that kitten will need. So, for example, a kitten that is just between, a newborn to a week old will need far more frequent feedings and will need to be kept super warm as compared to a kitten who is, let's say, 4 weeks old. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of this topic, guys, it is very important for me to remind you that if you do ever find abandoned kittens, you should actually wait a few hours to see if their mother comes along to feed them or not. This is because feral cats or stray cats will periodically leave their kittens because they also have to go and hunt and find food, and then they will return to feed their kittens. So it might actually be distressing for a cat if she comes back to find her kittens are kidnapped. However, you might be wondering if it's possible to tell if a kitten is actually abandoned or if it's probably just waiting for its mother to come back. Well, there are a few ways you can go about doing this as well. Now, the easiest way to do this is to observe the kittens from a distance. If they look relatively plump, and especially if they're in a litter, they look relatively plump, they look relatively okay and healthy, they are not calling for their mother, so kittens have a very distinctive stress call that you can easily identify. It's a very high-pitched, sharp call that a kitten will elicit when it feels lost or in stress. So if the kittens are not making these calls, if the kittens are huddled together, they're relatively plump and they look somewhat warm, that means that their mother is probably around and their mother will eventually come back. So you should hold off because the decision to adopt a kitten is not one you should take very lightly. However, if indeed the mother does not come back due to any unfortunate circumstance, there might be, incentive for you to jump in and intervene. As I mentioned before, knowing a kitten's age is very important for the purposes of establishing a proper heating and feeding schedule for them. So now I'm going to talk about certain tips and tricks you can use to tell a kitten's age. Right, so the first thing you're going to do is look for an umbilical stump. What this is essentially a remnant of the umbilical cord. Now, all kittens, when they're born, do have an umbilical cord. Under normal circumstances, mother cats will bite these off. However, for a few days after birth, you might still be able to see an umbilical stump. What happens usually is as a kitten gets slightly older, the stump eventually dries off and falls off on its own. In some circumstances, it can get infected and you might need veterinary assistance if this is the case. But in any event, you should know that if you do see an umbilical stump, that this kitten that you've found is likely very young or newborn. So it cannot be more than 2 or 3 days old. Second, have a look at their eyes. Now, most kittens open their eyes when they're around 10 to 14 days old. However, in some circumstances, kittens can begin to open their eyes when they are just 7 days old. So if you see your kitten with its eyes closed, you can safely assume that this kitten is less than a week old. However, if the eyes are open, but they're very small and squinty and blue in color, then you can kind of tell that this kitten is likely just 1 to 2 weeks of age. Now, it is worth noting that all kittens, when they initially open their eyes, have blue eyes, and their actual eye color will set in later on when they're about 6 weeks or so onwards. So if your kitten's eyes are blue, it's very safe to assume that they have, eyes that recently opened. But there is a catch because some cats actually do have blue eyes. So for these kittens, their eye color actually will not change at all, as they age. Third, have a look at your cat's ears. Now, all cats, when they're born, their ears are actually flat on their skull, and they actually don't stand up to look like the pointy traditional cat ears that we know cats have. Now, this event of the ears actually standing upright happens when the cat is about roughly 10 days old. So if your kitten has its ears shut down, like over their head like this, then you can pretty much assume that this kitten is less than a week old or even possibly less than 2 weeks old. However, if the ears seem to be plump and upright and they seem to be standing on their own, then your kitten is likely somewhere around the 2 to 3 week old age or possibly even older. Now, bear in mind, as we discussed in the Scottish Fold video, that Scottish Folds indeed, have ears that rarely, if never, stand up. However, it is also worth pointing out that it might be very, very, very unusual to find a stray Scottish Fold kitten, but it is something you should be mindful of. So, after the ears, the next thing you would want to look at is the kitten's ability to walk. Now, most kittens can only crawl up until they're about a week or 2 weeks old, and they usually tend to stay together in a little creche with their siblings to keep warm. If your kitten has a wobbly gait and is somewhat able to stand and move around just slightly, they're likely around 3 weeks of age. And if you notice that the kitten is starting to attempt to run, but is still somewhat, wobbly on their feet or might not be that well coordinated, they're likely around 4 weeks of age at this point. But I do have to stress here that these guidelines are for normal, healthy kittens. So sometimes, unfortunately, with abandoned kittens, what happens is they don't have enough nutrition from their mothers, or they're sick for other reasons, and therefore they develop slower, so they may not stand up on time. There is a chance that a kitten you find might be having difficulty standing upright and walking around, even though they are probably, 4 weeks of age. It's just that they're unfortunately too weak. Next, you would want to look at your cat's teeth. All kittens are born with no teeth whatsoever, and their teeth only start coming in when they're around 2 to 3 weeks of age. And their canines, or what we call fangs, which is the really long pointy teeth, only start erupting when they're around 3 to 4 weeks of age. And part of the reason why mother cats will eventually wean their kittens is because they do realize that their fangs are coming in, their canines are out, they're kind of sharp when kittens do nurse, so that also serves as a trigger for the mom to start weaning them. So in any event, if your kitten has teeth, it's a very good chance that this kitten is already like 3 to 4 weeks of age. Finally, try to take a look at the kitten's ability to use the litter box. Now, this is a learned behavior that kittens usually pick up from their mom, although in many cases kittens can learn this on their own. They only really start to figure this out when they're around 4 to 5 weeks of age. Before that, kittens actually have a very poor ability to regulate their bowels. In fact, their mom stimulates their bowel movements for them. And this is very important because if you do adopt a kitten that cannot regulate their own bowels, you will have to do this for the kitten to ensure, that your kitten can actually regulate their bowel movements properly. If not, the kitten will have a plethora of complications which you do not want to deal with. And finally, as always, the very best way for you to tell your kitten's age is to obviously have a vet examine the kitten and give you an estimation. However, we do realize that there might be circumstances where you find an abandoned kitten and you just wish to help the kitten, but you don't know their age. And, a vet might be away, or it might be the middle of the night, or, there are circumstances where you might not have immediate access to veterinary care. So therefore, we've given you our guidelines. So that's for this video, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. I do hope you found this useful. The next time we're going to talk about if you do manage to adopt a kitten and you do decide that this is, a member of your family, how to feed and keep your kitten warm, which I'm really excited about. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, Dr. Luqman is signing out with a reminder to please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.